Hello shorthand writers, this is YouTube channel Parliamentary Reporter. This is exercise number 27 at 120 words per minute. Ready? Start. India has followed half a dozen countries in placing restrictions on foreign investment because of the pandemic-stricken condition of its domestic firms. The automatic route is now closed to investors from India's land neighbors. This new regulation has only one target: China. New Delhi is only the latest country to fear that a recovering China will take advantage of the rock bottom valuations of firms of national importance. India has long had barriers to Chinese holdings in critical infrastructure and technologically sensitive firms. Expanding investment screening to all sectors is an almost natural progression. The HDFC Bank share purchases by China's central bank was only a trigger. However, New Delhi should not be under any illusion. Foreign capital remains crucial to the country's economic success and will be doubly important as India tries to revive its economy. Making it more difficult for China will carry a price tag. China has been the fastest growing source of foreign investment in the last 5 years. Chinese investors have shown a remarkable degree of risk appetite and now have a substantial presence in over half of India's unicorns. A purely arbitrary method of deciding what types of investment is allowed would be a setback to India's decades-long attempt to be more attractive to investors from all countries. As the screening process matures, the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade should work out a process and precise regulations to decide what an acceptable investment is. The issue of offshore fund investments and who is the ultimate beneficial owner from an investment is trickier, though it should be recognized that these are used because India remains a difficult business environment. The spread of investment barriers is a reminder that economic openness is diminishing globally. China is not blameless. Look at its resistance to Indian service exports. The pandemic has seen great power rivalry only worsen, and economic factors such as infrastructure, technology, and finance move to the heart of geopolitics. India must walk a fine line. At its present state of development, it needs to expand its overseas economic engagements, even while remaining sensitive to its external security needs. When nations across the world are pulling out all the stops to flatten the coronavirus curve, it is incumbent upon leaders to refrain from any statement or action which could exacerbate the situation. But regrettably, not all world leaders have been responsible or circumspect in their utterances and behavior. United States President Donald Trump's tweets asking his supporters to liberate the democratic states of Virginia, Michigan, and Minnesota have been taken as license to indulge in dangerous behavior, disregarding norms of social distancing and easing lockdowns of businesses. This puts the lives of people at much greater risk. Brazil's president has summarily sacked his health minister, who was an advocate of social distancing and isolation. Despite a high number of cases, Brazil's president has dismissed the virulent pandemic as nothing more than a normal flu. Closer to home, in Pakistan, conditional congregations in mosques have been allowed, violating protocols laid down by the World Health Organization. Muslim countries across the world have not eased restrictions, and rightly so, and have got the full support of their clergies on this. This cannot be merely treated as the policy preference of specific countries and their internal affair, for its consequences will be global. The spread of the coronavirus disease has shown the intricate ways in which the world is interconnected and interdependent. In a world where borders are still porous, even when one nation slips, it carries the threat of the rapid spread of the virus. The international community needs to collectively insist on the need for scientific advice to be followed. Political considerations, which are clearly motivating the leaders who are advocating dangerous behavior, have to be put aside for now. This could mean the difference between life and death. In the afternoon of 14th April, just hours after Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the extension of the lockdown for another 19 days, hundreds of migrant workers made their way to Mumbai's Bandra West railway station. They had been waiting for the lockdown to end and had assumed that they could return home. Some reports say that this assumption was based on an erroneous news report about special trains with restrictions in place, including on interstate bus and rail travel. This was not to happen. The same day in Surat, hundreds of textile workers staged a sit-in demanding that they be allowed to return home. This yearning is not new. Soon after Mr. Modi declared the lockdown on March 24, hundreds of thousands of migrant workers began making their way home. Most of them walked long distances due to unavailability of transport. These large congregations of workers at close proximity of each other are disturbing. They represent a sense of desperation which is emerging from economic suffering and emotional anxiety. They also undermine the principle of social distancing. For one infected person in any of these gatherings has the potential of infecting hundreds, who may then come in contact with hundreds of others. It requires one incident to begin another chain of transmission, which can set back India's efforts in the battle against the pandemic. That is why a two-pronged approach is necessary to allay the anxieties of migrant workers. The first is recognizing that they are economically insecure, without incomes, and often without food. As the government of Kerala pointed out, without income support, compliance with the restrictions will be low. The government needs to immediately expand its cash transfer measure and include workers in the unorganized sector, at least till the lockdown is lifted. The partial lifting of restrictions in areas less vulnerable to the infection will help a segment of workers, but they need more direct financial and food support. There is a second element. Many workers are anxious to return home because they are frightened of the disease, of staying alone in the city, of the fate of their families back home. Travel will mean a high degree of risk because social distancing norms cannot be enforced in trains and buses. Travel is also difficult because their home states are not receptive to these workers, given the fear that they may spread the infection in villages. These are all real constraints, but the issue requires more sensitive communication and the announcement of measures which allay their anxieties and encourages migrant workers to stay where they are. Farmers are currently harvesting a bumper Rabi crop. The India Meteorological Department has forecast a 100% normal southwest monsoon with the possibility of a weak La Nina conditions developing in the second half of the 4-month season from June to September. La Nina is the opposite of El Nino, that is generally not favorable for rainfall in the subcontinent. That bodes well for the coming Kharif planting season too. Agriculture is important from two standpoints. The first is inflation control, which is predicated on adequate supply of food, feed and fiber. Secondly, farmers and rural laborers have high marginal propensity to consume. The Indian economy today needs both low and stable inflation as well as boost to spending, which is best guaranteed by increasing farm production and incomes.